Welcome back, everyone, to the HR Exchange podcast. My name is David Rice. I'm the editor of the HR Exchange Network and your host for these things. I'm joined today by Heather Doshay. She is the Chief People Officer at Webflow. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk because I noticed, like, on your LinkedIn profile, you have remote work, as kind of a passion of yours. And so I wanted to bring up remote work with you today and kind of have a discussion around that, because I think it's something that's obviously top of mind for all of us. And 2021 was kind of supposed to be the year where we were going to figure out what comes next. And I think a lot of people are locked into remote work probably for the rest of the year, certainly the way things are looking. But as we analyze how people are working remotely, it's been said that we need to distinguish between crisis-induced work from home and a true remote work culture. And I think for some people, recognizing the difference there is difficult. So I wanted to see if you could kind of explain to us how you see those two things and, what are the key differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to give you some context, like you mentioned, I'm a remote work enthusiast. I've been working with remote teams for 5.5 years now, and I've been remote myself since 2018. And so I think some big caveats that folks who never worked remote should know are, pre-pandemic Webflow, where I lead the team, we call it like the before times. Our before times were already 70% remote and 30% co-located in an office. And so I've been remote from day one at my company. And we were already set up for so much of what the world experienced in March when we went remote. And so, really very clear that there is a strong difference between crisis-induced remote work and just regular remote work, because for someone who was already working remote, I thought, gosh, we have this covered. Like, we're already set up for remote. We're just going to change a few things for the co-located folks. We're already set up. Let's do this. But what I didn't realize in the moment was how many other things are impacted when people are remote during a pandemic. So little things, mental health, for example, is a big one. Let's start there. I guess maybe 20% of US adults, they already manage a mental health concern. And so when you add in the pandemic and people are going remote for the first time, but they might also have unrelated from, remote work, but pandemic related mental health concerns, whether it be, health concerns or the economy or an election year or whatever else is happening that, that is 2020 and now I guess 2021. There's a lot of isolation that is a layer on top of remote work or with all the things that are going on around the world. And so if you have all those things going on, you might feel undue stress that you wouldn't have felt working remote, say during 2019, when after work you go meet up with friends for a happy hour or go to a gym class or do something else that kind of gets you out and social with folks. Now you're working from home all day and then you're staying at home all day because there's nowhere to go. And I think that gets even harder for folks who say have kids or have other things going on where maybe they don't have, like, say, a dedicated workspace because they're living in a large city where they've got a studio apartment. All of those things kind of layer on top of each other, where it's not just the remote work, it's all these things that are kind of coming together. But because you've never worked remote before, and this is the big change, you sort of attribute all of this to remote work. And so remote work has been very hard, I think, for a lot of people. But it's really not always remote work. Remote work is actually pretty easy if you know the tricks that I hope we'll talk about today. It's definitely challenging when you layer in all the things that are going on around the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of people came into the new year thinking, all right, great, fresh slate, and it's already been crazy. So
Yeah, I think I'm still optimistic. I know you say all of 2021. We've built our whole remote office, our return to office plan for our co-located employees. Like, we're ready to go, but the way it's scheduled is very much not like set dates, but 30 days after this happens, we feel safe to do this. 30 days after that is done for a successful amount of time, then we do this. And so that way it's a flexible plan. But I am confident that hopefully by middle of this year, we can start to see a return to office for folks who want to. Although I love that so many people are getting the joy of doing what I do every day.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it quite a bit. For those who adapted to remote work in 2020, I think this year, like we said, it maybe becomes the norm for the long-term future. So what kind of cultural changes, have to happen to address concerns that some have about remote work being, quote unquote, sustainable?
Yeah, I think it's, as HR people, as people, we have so much change management that we do all the time. But because I think we were thrust into this in a crisis, I don't think we all employed all of our best change management practices in the moment. Not only, I think, my counterparts across companies, we're not only dealing with what are the technologies that we need to change, and how do we need to like kind of make remote work? But so many companies were also exploring layoffs at that same exact time, and what's going to happen, contingency plans for how our business is going to run if we can't even, survive and thrive during this time. And so I think people might have skipped some steps on change management when it comes to shifting to remote work culture, because there were so many other things going on, and our people teams are generally already understaffed at so many companies. And so if you see all those things happening at once, but I think now knowing that there is sort of a shift to whatever the new normal is going to be, like what are the after times? If we know the before times and we're in whatever this is, like what are the after times, and how can we actually employ like the change management that we already know that maybe we didn't do as well when we were thrust into this, to really think thoughtfully through the next steps. So I think thinking going forward, to me, the culture of remote work is so much dependent on all the inputs. Like you can't control the output as much as you can control the input. And so figure out like, what are your recruiting strategies going forward? If you're hiring people, are you hiring people still in the location where you're based, or are you starting to be open to all over, the country or the world? And how, if we do that, how are we going to resource these teams? How are we going to educate these teams for this change? How are we going to engage these teams for this change to go remote and to go distributed? If we're planning on staying all in one place, but we're going to be remote for a little bit longer, what do we want to invest in those same things around helping to resource and educate people on remote work practices? It might feel weird, or like we missed the window to do it because it's now been, almost a year. But it's never too late to kind of think through, okay, we now recognize this is not a 6 to 8 week thing that we all thought it was going to be in March of 2020. This is a much longer thing. And in the after times, do we want to let people continue to work remote? And if so, what are our opportunities to kind of shift there? And then I think, with change management, there's also the technologies and systems, and how can we support all of those? The tooling has to change if you work remote. And the one thing that I think a lot of companies, if they haven't returned to the office in any capacity, don't know yet, is that it's so different to be remote. 100% everybody's remote versus say 30% of your team in an office and 70% remote, or even worse, 70% of your team in office and 30% remote, because you end up getting sort of like a second-class citizen feeling amongst your remote employees if now suddenly the all company town hall meeting is happening in a room. And if you're remote, you just get like a screen share, but you don't see or hear the enthusiasm in the room. You suddenly feel like, wait, I'm missing that joke. Someone just said something in the side conversation and I missed it. And it gets really messy. And so thinking through, how will we actually build the technology and systems to support whatever our future looks like? And what kind of like norms do we want to encourage and reinforce? What do we want to think about how, a meeting cadence would go? So if, we're having a all remote meeting, how do people raise their hand? How do they share? How do they engage? It looks very different. And to really document all those things, and then to figure out how to use an actual change management practice to, socialize, drive awareness, resource the team to train them, and then help reinforce the behaviors over time. But I don't think many people did that, and it's understandable because there's, a whole crisis going on around everybody.
Yeah, it's been a hectic year to say the least. It's been more than just a shift to remote to focus on, right? And there's certainly a lot to think about as we bring people back. I think the shift has impacted everyone in our organizations in different ways. And, I think one group that has kind of maybe found it difficult at times and is probably looking forward to the return to the office is managers. So for those who thrived in office cultures, though, what are some of the adjustments that they have to make to be as effective and engaging with their employees in the remote setting?
Totally. I think there are some big things. So I think for starters, I know those managers who are like, I prefer in an office team, I prefer a co-located team. I don't have a lot of trust. And it's funny, I first had a distributed team, not because people were remote. This was 5.5 years ago. I inherited this team that was a regional team. And so I got experience with a distributed team that were all in offices, but they were in different locations. And I can't see what's happening in the Seattle office or in the LA office when I was based in the San Francisco office. And so I had to learn to trust. I had to learn to be flexible. I had people in different time zones. I had to learn to be extra effective in my information sharing. And so those are the big 3 things that I would say. One is like, if you don't have trust for your team members because you prefer an in-office and you're kind of like, I can't see them. Are they really working? I like to see somebody at seats typing away, whether they're not there secretly like messaging their friends about, whatever their distaste is for something that happened in the office, or they're working really hard. People seem to believe that if they can see the person working, they must be working. And if they can't see them, they can't trust them. And those feelings are maybe the most uninspiring feelings for a direct report. So if you're on the other end of it, think about if your manager was like, I want to see you check in with me every morning at 8 a.m. and like, just give me a stand up, let me know that you're there. And at 5 o'clock, let me know that you're still there. And like, I'm going to check in on you and I expect an SLA of a 15-minute turnaround on all my messages. I mean, all you're going to do is the bare minimum because you're just so afraid to miss the rules and you're not inspired to do good work. And so I think trust is number one. I think number two is flexibility, and to recognize that people now have new circumstances. So depending on your situation, if you live in a 1-bedroom apartment and you and your partner are both working from home, and maybe you have like a kid and you're in a big city, like all these things become really difficult. And so you may not be as productive during the normal hours when, say, maybe your kid is in school and you have to check in on them to make sure they're still doing their work. But maybe you can find yourself being ultra productive at nights or on the weekends. And assuming they're an exempt employee, I'm not going into like the details of like FLSA, but assuming they're an exempt employee and they're able to make those choices for themselves, how can you allow them some flexibility to recognize that if you give them the trust that they're going to get the job done, here are the results that I want to see. I don't care how you get from A to B, just get to B. And let me give you the resources to get there, which include flexibility. Then maybe people will do their best work, and maybe they'll even get past B and they'll get to C and D and E because they feel so empowered to do that work. And they might find that they really work better at nights. Everyone has different bursts of energy. And so if you can employ trust and flexibility and kind of get out of the mindset of, I don't believe that they're working because I can't see them, you might actually inspire a more engaged workforce, which I think is true for in-office cultures as well. I think everything that I say also applies to in-office, but I know that's not necessarily the most traditional viewpoint. I'm not a traditional leader, I will just say. And then I think the last thing would be like being really good at information sharing. So I remember when I was in office, if I saw the person that I wanted to get something from, so I would say, hey, you have this report, I want it. I would just, if I saw them at their desk and like they have headphones on, I would walk over, tap them on the shoulder, hey, can you send me this report? Because it's so much easier to ask for that than it is to say, send a message and formally ask for the report. And they may not prioritize you right away. And I know if I tap them on the shoulder, they have to give me what I need. And then you go remote and you can't tap anybody on the shoulder, and you have to always get good at asking for things. And so really honing that skill set of really being a clear communicator, finding your avenues for asynchronous communication, making asks very clear with the right context and the right time without overwhelming people, making sure that the deadline or the ask timeline is like written in the comms. And it's so tactical, but it really makes a huge difference. And you realize it out of necessity at some point, but the more you can train yourself to be a really effective written communicator and allow for asynchronous communication and ask for things in advance so that knowing you might not get the response right away when you don't know what other messages the person is getting, all of those things can help you be a more trusted and effective leader.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said there, trust in the process, or trust in the results, and looking at the results and letting the people establish the process that works for them. I think leadership has to help management kind of figure this out as well. And so what advice would you have for HR leaders, L&D leaders, C-suite execs, whatever it may be, to kind of how to help them in this, help managers in this new setting, and thus help the people around them?
Totally. I could write a book on this. And I think a lot of people could too. I can just share some things that we do that I think maybe are beneficial. And again, we've had an early start because we've been remote as a company for the entire 7 years we've been operating. And so I think having that kind of gives us a little bit of a head start on some of these things. But I think the biggest thing is, one, set the tone from the top. So as HR leaders, like not only should you be setting that tone, but also role modeling the behavior through your leadership team. Your CEO should be role modeling the behavior. Typically, people aren't micromanaging managers unless they have fear or lack of psychological safety that they can be successful, that they're trusted. And so if the CEO is putting pressure on the C-suite or the VPs, who are then putting pressure on the directors, who are then putting pressure on, like, everyone feels this pressure. It's sort of like a, I don't know if I can say bad words in this, but like a CYA sort of environment. Everyone's trying to cover themselves. How do you expect your managers not to turn to micromanagers? How do you expect people to do their best work? And so if the CEO is trusting their leadership, and the leadership is trusting their directors, and the directors are trusting their people, it sort of trickles down into the culture. And so I think that's number one. And we have to role model that behavior 100%, including our people teams have to do that too. But I see people teams today as being partners to the business. And in order to do so, you have to really build those relationships and that trust to kind of encourage them to understand why. I find it especially hard with certain roles that tend to be in office, like sales teams really like to be in office, have that sort of pool of people mentality, and maybe they're cheering along every time a deal is closed, and they don't have that environment. And so now they're stressing about things. So they're still trying to close the quarter, and the economy is rough. All of these are a perfect storm of things that are happening. So how can you really help the team members that you partner with, those leaders that you partner with, have the want for themselves to really trust their team and find new ways to celebrate and find new ways to those things. So being kind of a strategic problem solver partner is probably the high level, so that leaders are modeling the behavior. And it's not coming from people, it's coming from everybody. Because ultimately people teams can't set the culture. It's the leaders at large. And then I think to buffer all of it and to kind of resource and scaffold all of it, I think managers can be really empowered if they have coaches. And I know this is expensive, but we partner with 2 different partners, and there's different price points in all of the world of coaching and managing. We partner with a company called Torch, a company called Bravely, and Torch is sort of dedicated coaches for your managers, higher price point, but every manager will get a dedicated coach and they can work on all of these things. How do I help guide someone through remote work, all of that. And then Bravely is a lower cost, really great product that basically any team member can access in real time. Just sign up for an appointment. You might get the same coach every time. You might get a different pro. You can kind of figure out who you want, and you can figure out whatever topic it is, from your mental health to like, I'm struggling to have this conversation with my direct report. I can't see them. I can't read their body language. They never turn on their video. What do I do? All of those things that happen, really empowering and resourcing people. And it costs a little bit of money, but if you think about cost of attrition and cost about lack of productivity, it's a very small price to pay to help empower people. And it feels like a real perk. It feels like a benefit to the business that, wow, my company is investing in my career because they're giving me access to coaching. And doing that also takes time off of you. I truly see these kinds of functions as an extension of your people business partner team or your HR business partner team. And the questions that you have to deal with, you can just defer and redirect certain things to, say, a coach that is a professional that can give someone a full hour on this. So you can focus on some of the change management initiatives when you're meeting with folks. And then I think lastly is you can also build things in-house. Like if you don't have a huge budget, how can you, think through training opportunities that you can build in-house? So like our director of people, Nicole, built this great psychological safety training that she just, did research on the internet, understood a little bit about the theories. She's getting her MBA right now. It was great practice kind of thinking through all these things, and was able to put together a training and have all our managers take it, so that it cost us $0, but we're able to all kind of get access to the great support and training. And it helps build, I think, trust that we're kind of prioritizing the right things, that we chose not a micromanagement course or a how to get things done course, but a psychological safety course. And kind of what you share, you're explicitly sending those values, but also implicitly sending those values as well. So I think ultimately all of these things that I've just shared are things that totally applied for us when we had a co-located team as well. And all of these things would still support your company even when you go back to office. So investing in things that can definitely be an extra layer that you might need right now, but also they don't need to go away once you're back in office. You're not wasting time for a temporary solution. These are long-term real solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now more than ever that investment in people's, psychological health is a big thing. And we look at the health of organizations as a whole. It's obviously been a difficult time. And I think that's true in a lot of cases, just because, like we said, the state of the world, employee well-being, it's one of those things we keep coming back to, right? In HR right now, whether that's mental or physical health. So the economy, being hard on a lot of companies, unemployment is up. How have you gone about designing a strategy to keep your people and their health in focus? Because ultimately, engaged employees, they play a huge part in the overall health of the organization.
Totally. I almost think of like, there's layers and dimensions of health, right? So there's like mental health, there's physical health, there's financial health, there's all these different types of well-being that exist. And we try to cover them all. And I think, starting with, when the pandemic hit, like how can we make a contingency plan to lay off, nobody if something goes sideways for us? And how can we really think through these things strategically so that we're not just making, rash choices around supporting our people, and having that kind of safety and being able to communicate a plan, even if you don't know what the future holds. Like that transparency with your team, I think, is a absolutely free and really important layer to have. I think that kind of gives the psychological and mental health safety a little bit higher, as well as the financial safety a little bit higher, in a world where a lot of companies are sort of opaque in how they do things. And so that transparency is huge. And then I think also just acknowledging that this is a challenging time, and just saying, like, it goes a long way to say your well-being is our priority. And it is, it should be. And if it's not, like, other things to work on. But I think, and then the next thing is most companies offer benefits. So reminding people of what those benefits are. There's such low utilization on an EAP, and that's a mental health benefit that you might have. You might not even realize you have it because you just kind of sign up for it with all of your other benefits. But how can you kind of really encourage utilization of an EAP in this time? Those things are stigmatized in so many places. How can you destigmatize them by really normalizing it? I'm a big believer in mental health. And so I'm very open with my team and our company at large around, I have anxiety and I see a therapist and I put it on my calendar so everyone can see, and I share when I'm doing that. And I think having leaders really show that vulnerability too, and kind of acknowledging this is normal. We all deal with these things. We're all humans, and we have all these great resources for you. How can you really kind of shift the narrative to focus on what you do have and what you can offer, no matter what it is. You might be pulling scraps together if your company's in a strict budget. And then if they're not, really, how can you consider other dimensions of health? And so I feel super fortunate that Webflow is not in a financially constrained position at this point, and we're able to really grow and invest in our team members. And so the two things that I would just maybe give a shout out to that we're working on right now is, one, really thinking about flexible options for health as well. So obviously there's the benefit side that you already offer. How do you double down? But we're working with a company called Compt. And what they do, they're a small startup based out of Boston, and they allow for flexible perks. And so all we do is offer a $200 a month health and wellness perk to all of our team members. And so no matter where you're based, some people offer like gym stipends or reimbursements, but then the gym shut down. And so I feel so lucky that we offered this from the start, because, we've got disabled employees who maybe don't want to utilize a traditional gym and they want to go to do something else. And so you can use it for a massage, you can use it for a facial, you could use it for hiking boots, you could use it for whatever it is. And it shifts so nicely that when everyone had to go home, people could invest in home gyms or meditation apps or whatever those things are. And so really going back to that flexibility that I mentioned, where managers can really thrive, how can companies create flexible opportunities for their team members? And then the new dimension, which I think is sort of the future state of where HR is going, but thinking about like financial wellness as well, and kind of like legal and structural wellness in your life. When I think about like where people's stress comes from in a bad economy, so much of it is, I might have a job, but now I'm a sole provider for my family because my partner was laid off in the economy, or my partner works at a restaurant, which is shut down, and we're now relying on this income we don't have. And, we've got kids at home with new needs. They need a laptop for school. Like, all these things are very stressful things. And I think, how can you think about the financial layer of wellness for your company? A lot of financial advisors will offer free sessions that you can kind of have them come in and do a talk with your team. Two perks that we're exploring right now, which hopefully will launch this year for our team. So by the time this launches, I hope I've already announced it to the company, but we're partnering with a company called Origin, which is really neat. They are this low-cost partner which offers certified financial planners and certified CPAs or tax advisors to your company for a low monthly cost. And so our company can then go into this platform, they'll have our company data, your salary or whatever, and then you can work with a financial advisor to figure out your own planning for your own life. And I know it seems weird to offer that to employees in some way, where it's sort of like, well, why are we helping them manage their money? Like, we pay them a salary, that's where it ends. But ultimately, when you think about the stress that's happening this year, how many of us have stress related to finances? And so having that access to that opportunity and that resource, it shows not only that you care about their entire being, but you're also helping them really be effective, so that maybe they won't go look for a job with another company when the economy does better, because they feel so taken care of here and they know they can make things work with what you provide. And then we're also offering Rocket Lawyer this year, which is, I think they offer some really low first year cost. So I'm naming a lot of tools, but I think these are lesser known tools for a lot of HR. We all know the HRSs, the applicant tracking systems, all the different things, but there's all these really great low cost perks that are lesser known from startups that I think really help kind of create this unique advantage to your company, that not only are you offering perks that are competitive when the world turns around, you're helping people and you're engaging people in their workday. And so Rocket Lawyer and Origin for legal health and financial health, so that people feel like they can do things that they need to do in their life. I can't speak to how great they are yet, because we're just getting started, but I'm really excited to be able to say to employees, hey, you can file your taxes this year for free. Hey, you can do all these things for free. And I know these are things that are causing you all stress, because so many people have unique circumstances with collecting unemployment when they never had, for their partners or whatever else. And so just navigating all those hard things can be made so much easier with these small little additions of perks. And again, like, there is a cost to all of these various things, but the cost is really low compared to a disengaged workforce, compared to a workforce that's not productive because they feel stress at work. And I think also normalizing the fact that you're going to get a different level of productivity regardless of what you offer, but being really explicit around what results and performance look like, regardless of what you offer, that, can be helpful. But if you say, hey, we still want to see results, but we're not giving you anything to help support you, how do you expect people to kind of feel empowered to get it done?
No, absolutely. And I think, you hit the nail on the head there. Actually, people are crying out for a lot of this stuff, the financial side. We've seen a much bigger interest in 401k activity,
Mm,
people wanting to do different things with their money. And I think it's great that you've found, solutions for that.
totally.
What should be the focus for HR? This is kind of final question I wanted to ask you, is what should be the focus for HR people and people focused areas as we look at the next 6 months? It's maybe become very difficult, I think, in the current
Mhm.
setting to predict a year out for a lot of folks. And the folks that I've spoken to, the short term is very much taking priority right now, especially with the pandemic seemingly going from bad to worse. So what do they need to be focused on in the short term in order to keep people developing and engaged right now, and ultimately feel a long-term positive outlook?
Totally. And I guess great question. And first, I just want to say, like, also be kind, like, HR people, be kind to yourselves. Like, I'm right there with you. I feel like we're like the unsung hero of 2020 in a sense, in that, obviously we're not essential workers, we're not on the front lines, but we sort of are on the front lines in our roles, because so many things are being thrown at us. And I think sometimes we're under recognized for how much thought has to really go into making things work for our teams. And not, we're really embedded within our organizations in a variety of ways. And we've seen it from every angle this year. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, like, just want to give you a virtual hug, or, an elbow bump, or whatever it is that we can do these days. And so I think ultimately, one, be kind to yourself. And then two, like, what would happen if you like kind of step back from the mess? I think we're constantly chasing fires. I really feel that most people are firefighting these days. I mean, everything has been so unpredictable. I'm a big fan of contingency plans, thinking around the future. All my best laid plans have like thrown out the window. And I tend to over index on future plans, and then not utilize any of them if things go well. And then gosh, and then the one I don't do a plan for, everything falls apart. And so with, the political climate, with, the injustices that are happening around the world, with the shift in how people are working, with the financial crises that are happening around. I mean, there's so many pieces that are happening, just health crisis, every possible layer is happening. I think if you think of like a SWOT chart, and you have those like unrealized threats that you put on the chart every year that we could happen, like socioeconomic threats, like they're all real. And so I think for one, just be kind to yourself and give yourself some grace. I think that is like step one. And then once you take that chance to breathe, step back and try to see the forest for the trees. That would be my best advice. And try to think about, what can we do now that will serve us regardless? So like I say, like those investments in your managers, those investments in financial wellness, like all of these things are helpful right now, and they will go a long way. But once this goes back to whatever the new normal is, or the after times, hopefully they'll still be really appreciated and beneficial. Like, there's never a world where even if the economy is good, you still probably wanted financial advising if you could have it for free through your company. And so what are the things that we can do that will serve us regardless? And then I think also, this is a big one, having a plan for transition back to whatever the new normal is, because I think a lot of people are thinking, should we let people keep working remote or not? But what they're not thinking about is all those second order questions that will come from it. So if people can just work remote from wherever, can they move to wherever? Can they live wherever? Do you have entities set up? How are you going to work with maybe a PEO to employ people through things? What are those extra costs? Like, do you want to let people work anywhere, or are they allowed to just work from remote from your location? And then if so, like, how do you know if they moved? Like, how are you kind of managing all of those things? And if someone is allowed to go to wherever, how are you thinking about time zones? How are you thinking about entities? How are you thinking about salary adjustments? All these pieces. And now if you're saying anyone can work from anywhere and we're going to go remote first, which a lot of companies are doing, which is awesome. But like, if you recruit people in other locations, what's your strategy there? And if you're going to start paying local market rates, are you going to adjust the people who are based in your, current office that maybe will move on their own? There's so many sort of second order questions that will come up. And I think if we can start to answer, how do we feel about these things now? When the time comes, we'll be ready with all of our answers sort of set. And I think really thinking through all of the if then what is really, really important right now. And I do think it's important to have an office transition plan, even if you don't foresee it happening till June. So much is changing, and so making it a really dynamic and workable plan is really important. But I do think knowing what the best practices are, figuring out the right partners for how to make your office a safe space. How are we going to secure enough, hand sanitizers to make sure the office goes around? Those things don't go bad. Should we buy them now? If we don't need them later, like, what are we going to do with it? Like, just thinking through every possible detail and planning it out, I think is really, really important in advance. Because what happens, again, like I said, is when we're thrust into a crisis, we don't think through change management, we don't communicate well, and then our company doesn't trust us. And so the more we can think through, like, from a safe, calm space, from forest for the trees, we won't have as much of that crisis comms that got us here in the first place, where we're feeling like we're firefighting. And so I think the key is to get out of the fire, to get proactive, and really to think through everything before it comes. So even if you're working remote the entire year and you say that to your company, what does 2022 look like? And start thinking about that now. So that would be my best advice. But I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time today. I really appreciate you joining us, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. I hope this was helpful for people listening, and I really wish you the best 2021, both you, David, as well as the audience at large. It's been a very interesting year. I am so optimistic about 2021, but I think so much of it comes from just like the new state of mind that we're all in. So hopefully we can all carry that with us through the year. But yeah, have a great day.
All right, big virtual handshake.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.